3 weeks earlier, the floor of Harlow Fabrication had run like a clock. Now, it could not legally weld a seam. Sloane Merrick stood in the middle of it at 7 in the morning, in a coat that cost more than most of her welders made in a week, and listened to a silence she had built without meaning to. The big overhead lights were on. The machines were not. In the center bay, a pressure vessel the size of a delivery van sat half-finished on its rollers, wearing a red tag that read, in block letters, "Hold." Beside it sat another with the same tag, and another. 12 of them now, if she counted the small ones, and she had counted them more than once, the way a person counts the reasons a thing went wrong. By the door, there was a steel hook screwed into the block wall. It was empty. It had held a ring of keys every working morning for as long as anyone on the floor could remember, and it held nothing now, and Sloane could not stop looking at it. She kept replaying the morning she had emptied it. It had happened in the glass office, with the whole floor watching through the window the way people watch weather. She had called him in. She had been so sure of how it would go. "You will sign the new procedures my way," she had told him, "or you will clear out your bench." The welders at the bays had gone still. Beck Harlow had stood there in his coveralls, a man built like a door, and he had looked at her for a moment with an expression she had mistaken for fear. Then he had wiped his hands on the rag from his back pocket, folded it, and set it on the corner of her desk. He had unclipped the ring of shop keys from his belt. "Then I'll clear it out," he had said. He had laid the keys on the glass quietly, the way you set down something that belongs to someone else, and he had walked out through the floor and out the roll door into the gray morning. He had not slammed anything. He had not raised his voice. That was the part she kept snagging on. She had been braced for a fight, and instead she had been handed a set of keys and a silence, and she had told the floor to get back to work, and by noon the first phone call had come in. "Before you keep going, guess who calls this shop first thing tomorrow morning? Some of what happens here you will not see coming, so stay with this one to the end. To understand how one quiet man could stop a whole shop, you have to go back 3 weeks to a morning that started like 10,000 mornings before it." The morning started in a small kitchen with a lunchbox open on the counter. Beck made the same lunch he made every day, because Josie liked the same lunch every day, and at 8 years old she had opinions that a wise father learned to respect. Turkey and cheese, crust cut off one half and left on the other, because she was in a phase of being 2 people at once. An apple, a note on a scrap of paper, which today said, in his blocky welder's print, "You are stronger than the spelling test." "Love, Dad." "Test words," he said without looking up. "Necessary," Josie said, "Necessary. Good. Next. February, February. There's a R nobody says." "There's a lot of letters nobody says," Beck said. "Doesn't mean they don't do the job." She grinned at him over her cereal, and he felt, as he did most mornings, the specific gratitude of a man who had almost lost everything and had gotten to keep the part that mattered. On the counter by his coffee sat a small keychain she had made him at a school workshop. 3 copper washers bent and looped onto a ring, one of them stamped with a lopsided letter J. He put it in his pocket every morning. He would have told you it was because he needed a keychain. That was not why. He dropped Josie at the school gate, waited until she was inside, and drove to the shop with his name on the sign. He was there before the sun cleared the water tower, before the first welder, the way he had been for 13 years. He walked the floor while it was still quiet. He ran a hydrostatic test on a finished vessel, filling it with water and bringing the pressure up slow, watching the gauge and the seams together, and near the top of the test he found a bead of moisture where there should have been none. He did not swear. He marked it with a grease pencil and found the welder, a kid named Colby, and instead of chewing him out, he put a hand on the vessel and said, "Come here, look, what do you see?" "Porosity," Colby said, going pale. "I'll redo it." "You'll redo it," Beck agreed. "And you'll figure out why your gas coverage dropped before you strike another arc, or you'll redo it again. That's not a punishment, that's the job." Merle Tunney, the old foreman, watched from 2 bays over with a coffee that was more milk than coffee, and the look of a man who has seen every kind of morning. "You're too easy on them," he said when Colby was gone. "I'm exactly as easy on them as the metal is," Beck said. Which is to say, not at all. Nadine Alcott, the authorized inspector, signed off a finished vessel that day on Beck's word, the way she always did, because the whole system ran on one plain fact that everyone on that floor understood and no one ever said out loud. Nothing left this shop stamped unless Beck Harlow said the weld was sound. He liked the shop best in that first hour, before the others came, when it was just him and the smell of cut steel and cooling flux and the particular quiet of a place that made real things. He knew every machine by its sound. He knew which grinder needed a bearing and which one only complained for the attention. He knew, without checking, which of his welders had been up all night with a baby and which had been up all night for worse reasons, and he adjusted the morning around them without ever saying so. That was a kind of skill too, though it never showed up on any certificate. Around 9, his phone buzzed with a text from the school, a reminder about the spelling test, and he smiled at it and put the phone away. Merle wandered over with the milk that was pretending to be coffee. "You ever think about what happens to this place when you finally quit?" Merle said. "I don't quit," Beck said. "I just get slower and meaner." "You're already slower and meaner." "See? Nothing to worry about." At the end of the shift, he hung his keys on the hook by the door, the same hook, the way he had 10,000 times, and went home to help with the diorama. He had not always been the man who hung his keys on someone else's hook. 13 years earlier, he had signed a lease on a 2-bay building with a bad roof and a good price, and he had hung out a sign that said Harlow Fabrication, and he had built the thing weld by weld. He had earned his code certifications young. Then, a few years in, he had earned the one that mattered most, his certified welding inspector credential, the license that let a shop like his put a stamp on a pressure vessel and swear to the world it would not come apart. He had written the shop's quality manual himself at the kitchen table, over more nights than he could count. He had developed a weld procedure for a difficult alloy that no one else in the region could run reliably, and a patent attorney Anna found had told him to protect it, and so he had. His name was on the patent. His name was on the lease. His name was on the manual and on the certificate and on the sign. Then Anna got sick. He did not talk about that year, even to himself, in complete sentences. There were the appointments and the drives, and the way the bills came in stacks that did not care what a man had built. When it was over, when Josie was 2 years old and the house had gone quiet in a way houses should not, Beck had done the math the way he did everything, plainly. He had sold his majority share of the company to an investment group called Keyhart Industrial Partners, and he had used the money to make the debt disappear so that his daughter would never once feel it. He had kept a minority stake, and the lease and the patent, and his job on the floor. There was a night near the end that he kept folded up small in a place he did not open often. Anna had been too tired to talk much, and she had held his hand, which was rough even then, and she had said, "Promise me you won't turn hard." He had promised. It had turned out to be the most difficult promise he ever kept, and the only one that truly mattered. A man could lose a wife, and a company, and most of his savings, and still be himself at the end of it. Or he could keep all of it and lose the part Anna had asked him to protect. He had decided, that night and every night since, which kind of loss he was willing to take. "You sold the whole company," Merle had said to him once, in the parking lot, years back. "I sold the company," Beck had said. "I didn't sell the thing that makes it work." He had not meant it as a threat. He had meant it as a comfort, mostly to himself. For 5 years, it had simply been true, and had never needed to be true out loud. 2 decent managers had come and gone, and the shop had kept its stamp on the strength of Beck's license and Beck's manual, and Keyhart had cashed its checks and left the floor alone. Then, in the fall, Keyhart decided the shop needed to be modernized, and they sent Sloan Merrick to do it, and they sent a new chief financial officer named Barrett Cross to help her. Sloan Merrick arrived with a clipboard and a plan and something to prove. She was smart. Beck saw that in the first week, and it was not nothing. She read a balance sheet the way he read a weld, quickly and without sentiment, and she asked good questions. But she had come up in offices where the product was a slide deck, and she believed, the way people in those offices believe, that any process could be made faster if you were only willing to be tougher than the last person. She walked the floor on her 3rd day with the CFO at her elbow, and she stopped at the row of vessels wearing red hold tags. "Why are these not shipping?" she said. "Because they're not right yet," Beck said. "They look finished to me." "They look finished to the eye," Beck said. "The eye isn't what they answer to. That one has a root pass that didn't fuse clean. It'll hold pressure in a test all day and then let go in year 3 with somebody standing next to it, so it stays on the rollers until it's right." She had looked at him then the way you look at an obstacle. He had looked at her the way you look at someone young who is about to learn something the hard way, and underneath both of those looks there had been something else, some small unwanted flicker of recognition, 2 stubborn people seeing their own stubbornness in a stranger. Neither of them acknowledged it. She made a note on her clipboard and moved on. Later that week she watched him from the glass office without meaning to. He was crouched next to a vessel with a younger welder, pointing at something she could not see from that distance, and whatever he said made the kid nod and grin and get back to work lighter than before. She had run teams for 15 years. She knew the difference between a man people obeyed and a man people believed, and she filed the observation away somewhere she did not have to look at it, because it did not fit the story in the folder Cross kept bringing her. Barrett Cross moved on with her, and Cross was the real problem, though it would be weeks before anyone said so. Cross had a warm handshake and a cold ledger, and he had been quietly steering a slice of the shop's material, spending to a supplier that existed mostly on paper. A shell he controlled, marking up steel and pocketing the difference. It was not a large theft yet. It was a growing one. And there was exactly one system in that building that threatened it, which was Beck Harlow's quality discipline, because Beck rejected material that did not meet spec, and rejected material-generated paperwork, and paperwork was where a careful man's careful theft went to die. Cross had tried, in his first month, to simply root around the quality office. He had learned quickly that there was no around. Every pound of steel that came through the roll door got logged, and Beck read the logs the way other men read the sports page, out of habit and genuine interest, and twice already Beck had flagged an invoice where the weight on the paper did not match the weight on the floor. Cross had smoothed both over with a story about a scale that needed calibrating. He knew he could not smooth over a third. So he stopped trying to beat the system, and decided instead to remove the man who was the system. So Cross did what men like Cross do. He built a story out of numbers. He pulled the delivery data and highlighted every delay, and he laid every delay at the feet of the quality holds, and he brought it to Sloan in a tidy folder with a tidy conclusion. The shop was slow, he told her, because one man on the floor treated his own judgment as more important than the schedule. Fix that, and the margins fix themselves. If you were her, new in the chair, eager to prove you could do the hard thing, Would you trust the numbers in the folder or the man in the coveralls? Keep your answer in mind. Sloane trusted the folder. She drafted a new sign-off procedure, one that let a vessel ship on a manager's approval when a quality hold ran past a deadline, and she told herself it was efficiency. She did not know she was signing her name to a door that Cross had built. The squeeze started small, the way squeezes do. Cross came to the quality office on a Tuesday with a batch of vessels that were behind and a smile that was ahead of itself. "The client needs these Friday," he said. "I need your stamp today." "They're not tested," Beck said. "They're close enough." "There's no such thing as close enough," Beck said, "on something people stand next to." "That's a very noble position," Cross said. "It's also costing this company a great deal of money, and Miss Merrick has noticed." Beck set down his pencil. "I don't stamp what I wouldn't stand under," he said. "You can quote me. I've been saying it for 13 years. Cross kept smiling and left, and Beck understood that a line had been drawn and that he was on the wrong side of it as far as the glass office was concerned. 2 days later, he found something worse than pressure. He found a signature. One of Cross's fast-tracked vessels had an inspection report signed off as passing, and the signature at the bottom was not Beck's and was not Nadine's. It was Colby's, the kid, shaky and new, put on a report he had no authority to sign. Beck found Colby by the gas lockers and did not raise his voice because raising his voice would have been about Beck, and this was not about Beck. "Did you know what you were signing?" Beck asked. "Mr. Cross said it was just to keep the line moving," Colby said, and then the rest of it came out in a rush. The new baby, the rent, the way Cross had said it would only be this once. I didn't know how to say no to him. Beck looked at the kid for a long moment. He could have taken that report straight to Sloane. It would have proven cleanly that something rotten was moving through the shop. It also would have ended Colby, who had a 2-month-old at home and had made one frightened mistake. "Here's what you're going to do," Beck said. "You're going to pull that report. You're going to redo the inspection honestly, and if it fails, you're going to hold it. And if Cross leans on you again, you're going to send him to me. You made a mistake because you were scared. That's human. Doing it twice because it's easier would be a choice. Don't make the choice." "Why are you covering for me?" Colby said. "I'm not covering for you," Beck said. "I'm giving you a chance to cover for yourself. There's a difference, and you'll understand it in about 10 years. The pressure did not stop at the batch. Over the next week, Cross found a dozen small ways to make Beck's job harder. He rescheduled material so tests bunched up. He moved a deadline forward by a day and blamed the client. He dropped comments in meetings about how quality was a cost center and how cost centers got trimmed. Beck absorbed all of it the way he absorbed everything, without drama, and kept passing only what deserved to pass. But he was not a fool, and he could feel the shape of what was coming, the way you feel weather in a bad knee. He started, quietly, making copies. Not because he wanted a fight, because a man who has been through one hard season learns to keep the receipts for the next one. That night, he sat on the floor of Josie's room and helped her glue cotton balls onto a shoebox to make a diorama of a snowy field, and his hands were steady, and his jaw was not. The ultimatum came on a Thursday. Sloane called him into the glass office, and Cross was there, standing off to the side with the patience of a man who has already won. She slid the new procedure across the desk. "I need your signature on the revised sign-off policy," she said. "It streamlines quality holds. It's not optional." Beck read it, slowly, all of it, because he read everything slowly and all of it. When he was done, he set it down. "This lets vessels ship without a completed inspection if a manager decides the hold has run too long," he said. "You're asking me to put my name on a system that ships things I haven't cleared. I'm asking you to be a team player, Sloane said. I've been a team player for 13 years, Beck said. The team is everyone who ever stands next to one of these things. I answer to them. Sign it, Sloane said, or clear out your bench. I'm not going to keep fighting one welder over the schedule of an entire company. And there it was. She was so certain of how it would go. She had a mortgage in her mind, and a daughter she had heard about, and every reason a man has to fold, and she was certain he would fold, because in the offices she came from everyone always did. Beck thought about Josie. He thought about the mortgage, which was real. He thought about the difference between a job and a name, which he had spent 13 years learning was not the same difference at all. He had learned it the hard way, in the year he sold the company. A job was a thing you could lose and find again. A name was the sum of every time you had done the right thing when the wrong thing was cheaper, and once you spent it, no amount of money bought it back. Cross had a title and a salary and a car, and Cross did not have a name, not really, not the kind you could hang on a building. Beck had almost nothing in the bank that month, and he had the only thing that had ever been worth having, and he was not about to trade it for a policy he could not stand under. Then he wiped his hands on his rag, folded it, and set it on the corner of the desk. He unclipped the ring of keys from his belt. Then I'll clear it out, he said. And he set the keys down on the glass and he walked out through the floor and into the gray morning. Sloane told the floor to get back to work. She was already thinking about how she would spin it, how she would tell Keyhart she had made the hard call. She was certain he would be back by Friday, hat in hand. By noon, the phone rang. It was the biggest client, and they were not calling to ask where their vessels were. They were calling to cancel. Sloane took the call herself, and the client's engineer was polite and immovable. Our contract specifies the Harlow weld procedure for the alloy sections, he said. That procedure is licensed to us through Mr. Harlow personally. We've confirmed he's no longer with the shop. Without him, we have no qualified procedure and no inspector of record. We can't accept vessels you can't certify. We're moving the order. You understand what you're telling me, Sloane said. I understand it better than you do, the engineer said, not unkindly. We've bought vessels from that shop for 11 years. We bought them because of one signature. You didn't just lose a welder, Miss Merrick. You lost the reason we trusted the building. She hung up and sat very still, and then Nadine Alcott knocked on the glass and came in and made it worse, in the plain way of people whose whole job is telling the truth about metal. You should know where the certificate stands, Nadine said. The certificate of authorization that lets this shop apply the code stamp. It isn't the company's, not really. It runs on a qualified inspector and an approved quality manual. Your inspector was Beck. The manual was written by Beck, and it names him. At the next audit, without him, the certificate lapses. Until then, honestly, I can't in good conscience witness a stamp on your say-so. So we hire another inspector, Sloane said. You can try, Nadine said. There are not many, and the good ones are working. And even if you found one tomorrow, they'd have to review and requalify the entire program. That's months. And there's the matter of the procedure, which isn't yours, and the building, which, well, you'll want to talk to your legal people about the building. Sloane spent the rest of that day making calls that all ended the same way. Every good inspector she reached was already working, and every one of them, when she explained the situation, went quiet in a manner that told her they had already heard, because the trades are a small world, and word of a man like Beck walking out travels fast. One of them, an older woman in another state, said the thing plainly before she hung up. You had a certified inspector who wrote his own program and stood behind it for 13 years, and you ran him off over a schedule. There was a pause. I can't help you, I'm not sure anyone can help you but him." Guess what the legal people found when they pulled the file? They found that the lease on the two-bay building, the building the whole company operated out of, was still, 13 years on, in the name of Beck Harlow. Sloane sat in the cold shop that afternoon and looked at the red hold tags multiplying down the row, and she understood all at once and far too late what had walked out the door with a quiet man and a ring of keys. Not an employee, the foundation. She had fired the floor out from under her own feet and called it leadership. Merle Tunney had worked in that shop since before Sloane Merrick could drive, and he did not like watching a good thing get wrecked by a clever thief, so he did something about it. He and Nadine spent 2 evenings with the records. Merle knew where the bodies were, because Merle knew where everything was, and it did not take long, once someone actually looked, to see the shape of what Cross had done. The shell supplier, the marked-up steel, the invoices that did not match the deliveries, and, threaded through it, the pressure on a scared kid to sign what he should not have signed, to keep the paper clean. They brought it to the Keyhart board, and the board convened a meeting, half public in the way these things are, with the floor supervisors in the room because Merle insisted. Cross tried to talk. Cross was good at talking, but it is hard to talk your way out of your own invoices, and Merle laid them on the table one by one, and Nadine explained plainly what each falsified report would have meant if a vessel had let go. When the chairman finally called the vote, he called it out loud, the way Merle had asked him to. 7-1, the chairman said. "The motion carries. Mr. Cross, your access is revoked effective now." 2 people from building security walked Barrett Cross out to the parking lot, and he was still talking when the door closed behind him, and after that no one in that shop spent another word on him. He was gone, and the gone did not need forgiving, because he had never once been afraid, only greedy, and the story simply stopped following him. The scared one was a different matter. Colby Frey stood up in that meeting on his own, with his hands shaking, and he told the truth about the report he had signed. He did not have to. No one had named him. He said it anyway, and when he was done he looked like a man waiting to be hit. Sloane looked at Beck, who had come in for the audit and was standing at the back with his arms folded. Beck did not say anything. He just gave the smallest nod, the kind you would miss if you were not watching for it. "You pulled the report and redid it honestly," Sloane said to Colby, "before any of this. Is that right?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then we're going to remember the part where you fixed it," she said, "and the part where you stood up just now. Sit down, Colby, you still work here." When the room cleared, Sloane picked up one thing off the table and kept it. It was the shop's quality manual, the old copy, and in the margins, in a blocky welder's print, were 13 years of a man's corrections and second thoughts and small kindnesses toward whoever would read it next. She read it that night, all of it, at her own kitchen table, which was cleaner than his and lonelier. It was the most boring document in the world, a quality manual for a fabrication shop, procedures and tolerances, and the correct way to log a rejected heat of steel. And it was, underneath, the most careful thing she had ever read, because on nearly every page there was a note in that blocky print. A reminder to be patient with new welders. A story about why a particular rule existed. Once, in the margin, the single line, "If you are tired, stop. Tired hands lie to you." She sat with that one a long time. She had been asking tired hands to sign things for a month. Beck spent those 3 weeks learning what the walkout cost and what it gave. It cost him sleep, and it thinned the savings faster than he liked, and there were a couple of nights at the kitchen table with a calculator that were not his favorite nights. He did not pretend otherwise. But there was also this. For 3 weeks he was there when Josie woke up, and there when she got home. and he took her to the library on a Tuesday afternoon like it was nothing, like afternoons were a thing a father could simply have. And she looked at him sideways in the car and said, "You're less tired." And he had to pull over for a second, because she was right and he had not noticed. He was not angry. That surprised people who did not know him. Merle came by and found him rebuilding the fence in the side yard and asked how he was holding up. And Beck said, "A man can be honest, or he can be comfortable. Most days you get to be both. The days you don't are just the price of the days you do." Josie had asked him, once, in those 3 weeks, if they were going to be okay. He had told her the truth, which was that they had been okay through much worse than a lost job, and that being okay was not a thing that happened to you, but a thing you decided, most mornings, on purpose. She had thought about that with the seriousness she brought to spelling words. "Okay," she had said finally, as if agreeing to a contract, and gone back to her diorama. "You could sue them for the building," Merle said. "Rent's been theirs a long time. The lease is yours." "I could," Beck said, tightening a bolt. "I'd rather fix a fence." On a Saturday, a car he recognized pulled up to the curb, and Sloane Merrick got out of it without a clipboard, which he had never once seen. She came up the walk and stopped a polite distance away, and for a moment neither of them said the thing that was sitting between them. "I was wrong," she said finally. "About the numbers, about you, about what I thought running a place meant. I let a man with a folder tell me a story because it was the story that made me look decisive." She took a breath. "I'm not here to order you back. I don't have the standing to order you anywhere. I'm here to ask." Beck looked at her for a long moment, and the unwanted flicker from that first day on the floor was still there, and it had grown into something he was not ready to name and could no longer pretend not to see. "Ask, then," he said. Before she could, the front door banged open, and Josie came out to inspect the visitor with the frank suspicion of an 8-year-old. She looked Sloane up and down. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a copper washer, one of her spares, and held it out. "My dad has one of these," Josie said. "You can have a starter one." Sloane took it like it was made of gold. Beck watched his daughter hand a stranger a washer, and decided that he did not, in fact, have to say yes today. But he found he did not want to say no. He went back on his own terms, which were the only terms he had ever been interested in. He did not go back as an employee to be ordered around. He went back as the quality authority the shop had always actually run on, with his stake restored to something honest, his manual reinstated as the law of the floor, his name back on the certificate where it had always belonged. He sat across the desk from Sloane, and this time he was the one with the list. "My standards," he said. "Written down, mine, and no manager's deadline overrides a hold. My name on the door, because it's on the lease anyway and we might as well be honest about it. And I leave at 2 o'clock on Fridays to pick up my daughter from school. That one isn't negotiable. The rest we can talk about. And Colby stays," Beck added. He made a scared mistake and then he fixed it in front of a room full of people who could have ended him. That's worth more than a man who never gets scared. Promote him. He's ready, or he's close enough that being trusted will finish the job. "Agreed," Sloane said. "All of it, including Fridays, especially Fridays." They restarted the floor together. The first vessel back on the rollers was one of the ones that had worn a hold tag for 3 weeks, and Beck redid the root pass himself, and they filled it with water and brought the pressure up slow, and the seams held, dry and clean all the way to the top. Nadine witnessed it and signed it, and the stamp came down off the shelf where it had sat unusable for a month. Colby Frey signed his first inspection report as a lead that week, an honest one, on a weld that had actually passed, and his hand did not shake at all. Merle watched the whole thing from 2 bays over with a coffee that was still more milk than coffee. "You going soft in your old age?" Merle said to Beck, taking the girl back, giving the kid a promotion. "I'm exactly as soft as the metal is," Beck said. "Which is to say, not at all, but I'm not made of metal, Merle. Neither are you, though you hide it better." At the end of that day, Sloane walked to the door before Beck did, and she took the ring of keys off the desk where it had sat as a monument to her worst decision, and she hung it back on the hook by the door herself. Then she left Beck set exactly where it had always gone, and she did not touch it, because some things a person has to hang up for themselves. Weeks later, it was an ordinary morning again, which is the best thing a morning can be. Beck made the lunch: turkey and cheese, crust cut off 1/2. A note that said, "You are stronger than the math test. Love, Dad." Josie spelled February and remembered the R nobody says. He dropped her at the gate and waited until she was inside, and then he drove to the shop with his name on the sign, which had always been his name, and which everyone had finally stopped pretending was just decoration. Sloane was already there when he came in, which happened more mornings than not now, and she had 2 coffees, and she handed him one without a word, and the handing of it said more than a speech would have. On her own key ring, next to the fob for the expensive car, there was a single copper washer, a little scuffed, threaded on and kept. Beck pulled on his gloves and walked the floor while it was still quiet. In the center bay, a finished vessel sat on its rollers, tested, dry, sound. He fitted the die into the press and pressed the code stamp into the steel beside the final seam, and it bit clean and true, the way it only ever did when an honest hand was behind it. A spreadsheet can measure what a man costs. It cannot measure what a man carries. That stamp had only ever meant one thing. In 13 years, and through every owner the building had worn, someone honest had stood behind the weld and would stand behind it still, with people on the other side of the steel he would never meet. He thought sometimes about the morning he had set the keys down, and how sure she had been. He did not hold it against her. Certainty was cheap, and everyone bought some. What was rare, what he had watched her earn one hard week at a time, was the willingness to be wrong out loud and then do the work of being right. That was worth more than never being wrong at all. He had told Josie something like it once, in smaller words. "Anybody can be sure," he had said. "It takes a bigger person to change their mind and mean it." By the door, on the hook, 2 rings of keys hung side by side now, catching the morning light. Beck's and hers. Neither of them said anything about it. They did not need to.